This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello and welcome to The Agenda. I'm Stephen Cole. As the world gathers in Glasgow for the COVID-delayed COP26 Climate Change Summit, this week we'll be hearing from three of the people driving plans to save the planet. Over the next 2 weeks, tens of thousands of delegates from all over the world will descend on Glasgow for COP26. By the time they leave, it's hoped they'll have come up with a plan to hit the ambitious climate targets set out in Paris 6 years ago. In the words of UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson, it could be a turning point for humanity. But just what exactly is on the agenda at this meeting? And can the world really come up with a workable agreement to save the planet? Well, joining me now from San Jose is Andrea Meza Murillo, Costa Rica's Minister of Environment and Energy. Minister, you are one of the driving forces behind the Beyond Oil and Gas Alliance, which is due to be launched at COP26. Can you tell us what exactly that is and how it works?
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. Yes, we're launching this alliance with Denmark. And it's an alliance that seeks to engage other countries and other stakeholders to talk about what would be a date where we can be really saying that we are phasing out of oil and gas exploration and production. We really think that with the climate crisis that we are facing, that we have been doing a lot of work on the demand side, but that we also need to address the supply side. And this is basically what we are launching. It's a call for other countries to join to talk about these aspects. It's very important that we really want to engage countries and other stakeholders in this conversation to learn from experiences, to share what are the challenges to talk and address these aspects of the supply side of oil and gas economy.
Minister, of all the intentions for COP26, this must rank, I think, as almost number one in the scale of its ambition for you and Denmark. How are you going to do this?
Well, we're right now in this engaging and having conversations with other governments. We are also seeing documents and data from different institutions, and it's a little bit, I think, how other initiatives has initiated. Through conversations, seeing the challenges, seeing the problems, and gathering together and saying, okay, we really need to work and establish a community because we know that this is not an easy task, and we know that we will be facing a lot of pushback from different stakeholders, and we know that we really need, to create a force. Raising the momentum, the political momentum, raising this element that it is important to start talking about this other part of doing the decarbonization of our economy. So it's basically in that way. Right now we're doing this, engaging and having conversations with other ministers, with other governments, having conversations also with other stakeholders, looking at numbers, looking at the different what different UN agencies are saying, reports. It's a little bit, to put the information together, to really generate a force and to raise momentum about this conversation.
Costa Rica and Denmark, two very important countries, but you're going to need bigger countries, bigger economies on board if you're going to achieve this ambition, aren't you?
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, it's always like this. We always need the big countries here, but you know that the magic of being small, and I will say small and beautiful, is that, you know, that we can really, that we can really, you know, do innovation and demonstrate. And this is a little bit the case. We really need to demonstrate that it is possible to decarbonize the economy. And it's a little bit, imagine a small country like ours in the middle of Central America with limited resources, and the things that we're doing in with our policies, with our frameworks. Yes, we still have a lot of challenges, but, you know, policy, it's important, and we really need to implement coherent policies to achieve the 1.5 goal. And it's a little bit about this. We start like small countries with Denmark as well, and Denmark is a producer. I mean, it's so great when you hear the Minister of Denmark, you know, in his conversations, how he is so clear, how difficult it was in his part, you know, to start addressing these elements.
If you want countries to stop their oil and gas production, they'll want some money for that, won't they? They'll want some remuneration. So who's going to pay that bill?
Well, I will say that, I mean, it is a conversation about just transition. And we can understand, you know, that when we are doing these transitions and you see that there are people who need to adopt new jobs, and there are countries who really depend on that, we really need to address this conversation. But in the other side, it's also, if you see what, you know, some countries, big producers are doing, it's a little bit, okay, I have this money and I need to take decisions, and am I going to invest in oil and gas exploration, or can I invest in renewables and in these other kind of activities that are aligned to the Paris Agreement goals? And at the end is a little bit also, you know, about the resources that we will be investing is taking the right decisions. If we continue investing in oil and gas, we will be locked in with these investments. But if we start using that money to deploy the new technologies, then we can be really seeing the changes.
Burning fossil fuels, oil and gas, of course, they are the chief drivers of the climate crisis. And yet the world's fossil fuel dependency seems to be increasing, not decreasing. So how can you change that?
It's about really aligning the investments. It's about this, giving coherence to the different policy frameworks on one side, but also then greening the whole financial system. And I think that this is also so important when we see the investment funds and that it is so critical that they also take into consideration these kind of aspects. When we talk about the multilateral banks, when you know, it's not only the governments, and this is so important, it's the private sector, it's the financial sector. And I think that, yes, the challenges are big, but we do have the technology. I think that we, as a world, we do have economy resources, and we do, I think now, have more clarity that it is possible. This is the decisive decade, and we really need to accelerate this transformation. And we're seeing good signals. When we see IMF starting a conversation around climate change, when we see the World Trade Organization and other stakeholders, you know, talking about these, taking measures inside their institutions to align what they're doing to the Paris goals. I think that these are really important steps. And of course, we need to do more. And this is, you know, a little bit this call from two small countries that we really need to accelerate and do more.
Okay, many countries have shown their hands. They have ambitious climate targets, net zero datelines. Do you think they will stick to them? And what happens if they don't?
Well, it's a negotiation, and we will see how everything will be developed and addressed. In a negotiation, you know, you always want these, and you normally get this part. I mean, and it's about this, the negotiation. But as a whole, we really need to understand that we are having as an international community, that we are taking steps, that we are giving signals to the markets and to the other stakeholders, and that, yes, probably in the negotiation, normally how we say it is that it's a deal that doesn't make happy anybody, but it's at least a deal. And I will say normally it's like a starting point. And then we can really be generating, other standards, higher standards, and continue pushing the system to enhance its ambition, to increase its ambition. And I will say normally it's how it works. And yes, with the San Jose principles, we're still trying to engage other countries, other stakeholders, to talk about the importance of having a robust system that will really contribute to the goals that we're all looking for.
How would you describe COP26?
It's a COP, it's a critical and important COP to accelerate climate action. This is the COP of action. In Paris, we had the deal. And here it's a little bit, to really say, okay, all of you guys, all of us, we really need to accelerate this. And it's about that. It's the COP to really demonstrate and to give to catalyze this action, because where science is telling us, if we really want to achieve the 1.5, we really need to accelerate. The window is closing, and this COP, it's the COP to catalyze this action.
Minister Andrea Meza Murillo, many thanks to you for joining us here on The Agenda.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Still to come here on The Agenda, Saving Africa. We'll be speaking to Malawi's Minister of Forestry and Natural Resources, Nancy Tembo.
Events have consequences. Words create impact.
One more offensive in a long line of battles that's been ongoing for more.
Just got to be careful here with some gunshots. Excuse us.
The world today matters for your world tomorrow.
The number of casualties is growing quickly.
Why, this is one of the hardest hit towns in the region.
The world today, every day on CGTN.
Welcome back to The Agenda. The effects of climate change on Africa will be one of the issues topping the agenda at COP26. It is one of the continent's most vulnerable to climate change, in spite of being one of the lowest emitters of greenhouse gases. So what does Africa need to happen at this summit? Joining me now from Lilongwe is Malawi's Minister of Forestry and Natural Resources, Nancy Tembo. Minister, climate change affects us all, of course, but what are the specific issues of most concern to Malawi?
Climate change affects us as a country that's just developing. Malawi is an agricultural country, and we depend on rain-fed agriculture. Once upon a time, we had predictable patterns of rainfall, and now we do not have that luxury. We have extreme weather patterns. There are times when we have long-drawn dry spells, and there are times when we have huge rainfall. And so we are having to now grapple in that scenario where we don't know when things are going to happen. There's a lot of rainfall, then we have to grapple with issues of flooding. And so, yes, we are on the receiving end of climate change even though most of these changes, we are not party to contributing to the change in weather patterns.
So is that the clearest evidence you can talk about in terms of Malawi and the clearest evidence of extreme weather being linked to climate change?
Yes, it is. For us, because the impact really is huge, because if you are dependent on agriculture, and if, for instance, you have a lot of rainfall, so you are happy with your crop, suddenly in the middle of the season, there's huge rainfall that just washes away your crop. So it has an impact on the way government plans, it has an impact on yields, it has an impact on revenue for government. And so in order for us to be able to develop, we need to have this predictable rainfall. People should be able to plan for what they want to do. If the inability to plan, I think puts everybody in a very awkward situation where even the government itself cannot plan on how many people will be food insecure or what they're going to realize from the crops, because our economy depends on the crops that we grow.
I mean, if you don't mind me saying so, that means Malawi is a victim of emissions, basically. It's not your fault, it's other people's countries' fault. So what would your message be to those people?
Yes, indeed. We are the victims of the huge carbon emitters out there in the developed world. Our message is that we are on the receiving end of the impact of climate change. They have caused because of their carbon emissions, have caused major cause of climate change. And therefore, they must take responsibility to help countries like Malawi so people can recover from this climate change impact.
And you are Minister of Forestry and Natural Resources, and you'd like a more integrated approach to adaptation programs in developing nations. What exactly do you mean? What exactly do you mean by that?
As a country, we know we are suffering extreme weather conditions, but we cannot just sit idle and lament. We have to find ways of making sure that we reduce the impact on the citizens of this country. So there is programs that are being developed. For instance, there is irrigation schemes that are being developed, water harvesting, landscape restoration. These are all programs that require financing. The challenge that we face is that there is not much forthcoming from the developed world. And where there is financing, the processes required to access that financing are so cumbersome, it's almost prohibitive. So what we are asking from the developed countries is for them to stick by their commitments to assist the least developed countries, to ensure that the processes that are in place for least developed countries to access financing are simplified. But also, we've been talking of other ways of making sure that least developed countries have resources. And we're thinking of developed countries looking at a way of debt relief, so that instead of least developed countries settling their debt, that money could be structured towards climate change adaptation and mitigation. That way, then we all work on the same page, because then instead of, in fact, at this time when we have the COVID situation, we were already in a very dire situation. And the COVID has just compounded that situation that we find ourselves in. So we have to deal with the COVID situation. We have to deal with all the other challenges that least developed countries face. And the envelope is rather small for us to be able to achieve all that. So we need some support from the developed world. And one of them is making sure that this climate financing is accessible by the least developed countries.
One of the results of the pandemic, and you mentioned already debt relief, but do you fear because of the pandemic there will be less chance of providing the necessary finance that you need to cut debt relief for Malawi?
I hope not, because they must realize that if we do not manage the impact of climate change in the least developed world, it affects them, it impacts them. Like we say, we live in a world now, in a global village. What is felt in one part of the world affects the other. And then if our situation continues to deteriorate, you see, even this migration that's taking place from the south to the north, it's because of the poverty, lack of opportunities, lack of jobs in the least developed countries. So they have a responsibility to ensure that they assist us.
COP26 is a massive talking shop. There will be a great deal of hot air coming out of it. What do you hope to achieve at COP26? I mean, it's something you can grasp, something you can hang on to, something that will mean something positive.
Well, what we hope is that we've already, as a country, Malawi, we have submitted our nationally determined contributions to COP. These are commitments that the government of Malawi has made. But we realize that these commitments that we make cannot be realized if we do not have the financing. And so
does it all, Minister, come down to money? Is it as straightforward as that?
Yes, there are things that as a country we would be doing because we will not sit idle to expect handouts. But even though there are efforts on our part, we cannot achieve the NDCs on our own. And I think even the developed countries themselves realize this. So as we go to COP26, we in the least developed countries are hoping that there's more realization by our partners in the north that they need to do more. And this is what they call, perhaps this is the time that we need to do something. This is the only opportunity we have to do something. And if they make COP26 another talk show, then perhaps there is no need to have other COPs in the future, because these are the challenges that we face and we have to grapple with them now. If we do not, we might not have another opportunity. And we are pleading with the North that please, if they could assist us, achieve the programs that we've set out to achieve. Otherwise, it just becomes a gathering of people and talk and back home. It has no impact on the development of the people on the ground. And that's not what these gatherings are supposed to be. So financing is for us in Malawi, and I think in the least developed countries, availability of financing. We are talking about the reduced carbon emissions. Malawi has committed to reduce its emissions by 2040 by 50%, but that will be dependent on availability of financing. We, as a country, we have a shortage in supply of power supply. And already the country only has 550 megawatts of power. What we need as a country is 1,000. That gap needs to be filled. And we are committing that if we get support, we should be able to get renewable energy to cover that. But we cannot commit today to say we're not going to use diesel power generators when we do not have the power, the adequate power. So for us to move from fossil fuels, we need support. We need to build more hydropower stations. We need to develop other technologies like wind power, and so on and so forth. So I think financing is a huge challenge because I think what we should be talking, this is the money, how efficiently can the availability of financing be handled. Because the other thing is that perhaps there are times when the developed world feel that perhaps their resources are not put to good use. There's times when they've complained of corruption or just abuse of the resources. We should be talking about how can we efficiently use the resources that are available.
Lastly, Nancy, Malawi is also a member of the Adaptation Action Coalition, which was launched by the UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson in January this year. Can you explain a little more about the thinking behind this group and what it's achieved, if anything, so far?
Our engagement with the British, for us, I think, has been most beneficial. We had the Minister Trevelyan visit Malawi recently, where she saw for herself what the efforts that Malawi is making on the ground. She was able to visit projects, and she saw the assistance of the UK government at play in our meteorological services. She has done the same, visiting other countries in the coalition. For her to appreciate the challenges that we face and what further support that we can get from the UK government. So for us, we find this coalition most valuable for us. Hopefully we'll continue this engagement even after COP26.
And Minister, what is your message to COP26?
COP26 must act, and it must act now. It must bear the responsibility. Future generations will look back at us and they will say, there was COP26, what legacy did COP26 leave? So it is up to us to make COP26 the hope for the future generation that it's supposed to be.
Minister Nancy Tembo, many thanks for joining us on The Agenda.
Thank you very much for having me, and hope to see you at COP26.
UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson says he wants COP26 to represent a turning point for humanity. And it's important that happens because, as all my guests have told me, time is running out for action to reach the goal agreed in Paris at COP21 6 years ago, to limit a rise in global temperatures to 1.5 degrees. In Paris, the world agreed to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions, known as nationally determined contributions, or NDCs. And the reason Glasgow is so important is that it looks like the world is failing to keep to its Paris promises. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change estimates that emissions need to fall by 45% from the levels in 2010 by 2030, and then hit net zero by 2050 in order to have any chance of keeping warming below 1.5 degrees. But the UN estimates that even if the 113 countries who filed their NDCs ahead of COP26 fulfill their goals, it would only bring emissions down by 12%. So, closing the emissions gap, the gap between what nations have committed to and what is actually needed, is going to be key to the success of COP26. And for that to happen, we have to hope that initiatives like Costa Rica and Denmark's Beyond Oil Gas Alliance gain real traction over the next few weeks. And even if the gap isn't completely closed, we have to hope major advances are agreed. As Nancy Tembo told me, this is the generation that has to make a difference if we are to save the planet, and COP26 might just represent the very last chance to do so. Don't forget you can watch everything from past Agenda episodes and find additional exclusive content on our website, cgtn.com/Europe, or on our YouTube channel. And of course, you can follow us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, at CGTN Europe. Coming up on a future agenda, sustainability. It's the buzzword of the moment, but what does it actually mean for some of the world's biggest companies? But for now, from me, Stephen Cole, and all the Agenda team here in London, it's goodbye.